So we are going to go ahead and get started with our very first ever rounding lesson. Okay, now I am the one who has created the video today, so haha, I know it's fantastic and I'm very excited to show it to you, but I will warn you, it's fairly long because we got a lot to get through today, and that's okay. We're going to break it up and have some conversations. I am not sending you to breakout rooms because that seems to mess us up every time, but we will have those conversations in this larger room here, okay? So rounding, we're going to talk about what it is, and then we'll watch a few things to get us warmed up. Here we go.
Let's take a look at our target and success criteria. Your target for this unit is that you will be able to use place value understanding to round 2- and 3-digit whole numbers to the nearest 10 or 100. In order to accomplish this goal, there's some vocabulary that we'll need to know. The good news is you already know quite a bit. The first word that you know is place value. The second that you should know is tens. The third is hundreds. Some words that we need to talk about today are estimate, the special math meaning of the word about, what is a benchmark number, and a midpoint. Rounding number by changing one or more digits to 0 for easier calculations. Estimating is when we push a number closer to a number that is easier for us to work with. Take a look at this example. If we look at a number line with 368, we know that that would be between 360 and 370. Those are what we call benchmark numbers, because numbers with zeros in them are easier to work with, so they're easier for our brains to identify or benchmark. The midpoint is what comes right in the middle of those two benchmark numbers. 5 is always our benchmark when rounding to the tens. 50 is always our benchmark when rounding to 100. When do we use rounding? We use this every day in real life, such as when we need to get supplies for school or for a party, and we have to determine the amount we would need. When we're ordering a pizza for a party, and we need to know how many slices we should have. When we're figuring out how many seats we might need for a gathering. When we're trying to determine the length of a movie, or when you're trying to figure out how much time you have to complete something. We're going to watch a BrainPop Junior rounding video. As we watch this, I'd like for you to think about some vocabulary words to discuss with your class. The first is rounding. What is it? What does it mean? The next is nearest 10 and nearest 100, also known as benchmark numbers.
All right, so I'm going to pause it there. We've talked a little bit about when we're going to use rounding in real life. Annie and Moby are going to show us a couple examples of this as well, of when they've used rounding in their life. And we're going to discuss these together by using these vocabulary words. So when I ask you what is rounding, I should hear nearest 10 and nearest 100. And you'll know what those mean after we watch this. Okay, so be ready to discuss and explain these words to me.
The next is nearest 10 and nearest 100, also known as benchmark numbers.
I'm doing a report on oceans, and I found some movies about ocean animals.
So that's as loud as it goes on my end, guys. You'll have to like turn it up on your screen really loud.
But I only have 30 minutes of library time. This movie is 37 minutes long. That's about 40 minutes. Do I have enough time to watch it? When you estimate, you use what you know or see to make a reasonable guess about an amount. How do you round to the nearest 10?
There's that word, nearest.
Here's a movie about coral reefs. About how long is the movie? Round the number to the nearest 10 to give you an estimate. The number 19 is between two tens, 10 and 20, but it's closer to 20. So when you round 19 to the nearest 10, you round up to 20. So this movie is about 20 minutes long. This This movie on whales is 64 minutes long. Let's round that number to the nearest 10. 64 is between two tens, 60 and 70. But 64 is closer to 60. So when you round 64 to the nearest 10, you round down to 60. This movie is about 60 minutes long. This movie is 45 minutes long. 45 is right in the middle between 40 and 50. When a number falls right in the middle, we round up to the nearest 10. So 45 rounds up to 50. The movie on sharks is about 50 minutes long. When you round to the nearest 10, look at the digit in the ones place. If the digit is less than 5, round down to the nearest 10. If the digit is greater than 5, round up to the nearest 10. And if the digit is equal to 5, round up. If a two-digit number has a 0 in the ones place, then it's already rounded to the nearest 10. When I'm rounding, I like to think of numbers going over a hill. When I reach 5, which is at the top of the hill, it's easier to go over to the other side to the higher number. How can you round numbers to the nearest 100? Check out this movie, Moby. It's about dolphins. About how long is this movie? You can round to the nearest 100. 118 is between 100 and 200, but it's closer to 100. So when you round to the nearest 100, you round down to 100. This movie is about 100 minutes long. When you round to the nearest 100, look at the digit in the tens place to help you decide whether to round up or down. In 329, the digit in the tens place is 2. Since 2 is less than 5, you round down to the nearest 100. So 329 rounds down to 300. Round this number to the nearest 100. Remember, look at the digit in the tens place. Since 7 is greater than 5, you round up to the nearest 100. So 872 rounds up to 900. Now round 254 to the nearest 100. First look at the digit in the tens place. Since it's equal to 5, we round up to the nearest 100. So 254 rounds up to 300. Anyway, Moby, I only have 30 minutes of library time. Which movie can I watch? The movie about coral reefs is only about 20 minutes long. So I can watch that one. You want to learn about coral reefs, Moby?
Now we're going to take some time to talk about those vocabulary words, nearest 10 and nearest 100, okay? You saw those in the video. What do those mean? What are nearest 10 and nearest 100? I'm coming back to you. What does that mean? Nearest 10 and nearest 100. Sophia?
When numbers go together?
Yeah, so it would be the number that it's going to move to, that it's going to go with, that it goes together. Great, that's a unique way of putting it. Aiden G, something to add?
So it's basically kind of like greater than and less than.
How
or
so?
equal to.
How so?
So it's basically like when you have a 5 and the 1 is in the 5, you equal it, and then if it's greater than 5 is like the greater than sign.
So now you understand why we taught you comparing first, because comparing, knowing if a number is larger or smaller than a benchmark number, is going to help you determine where you're rounding to. So yes, it is related to comparing. Okay, so nearest, we know that that means closest. So when we're looking at a number line, we've got a midpoint right in the middle, right? And then we're trying to figure out, is it closer to this elbow or this elbow? Which one is it nearest to? And that's where it's going to move to or round to, okay? So rounding is pushing those numbers closer to an easier number to work with. Very good. All right, we're going to continue on.
Time to discuss this vocabulary with your class.
And we just did that.
Rounding, nearest 10, and nearest 100. When we round, there are 3 procedures that we can follow. No matter what place value we're rounding to, these 3 will always work. The first step is to determine the place value to which you are rounding. Take a look at our example here. We are rounding 368 to the nearest 10, so our 6 in the tens place is underlined. Then we will identify the closest benchmark numbers. When we're rounding to the tens, it would make sense that we would need to identify the numbers that have a 10 within them on either side of our given number. 368 is between 360, and moving up on the number line would take us to 370. Again, these are the 2 tens that our number is between. Then we identify whether the number would go up or down when rounding. This is determined by looking at its location according to the midpoint. 368 comes after our midpoint of 365, so this would round up. One easy way to remember this is a rhyme. 4 or less, give it a rest. 5 or more, raise the score. So when we have 4 or less, we're below the benchmark of 5. When we have 5 or more, we are at the benchmark or higher, so we would round up. This is a rounding roller coaster. A rounding roller coaster is a very helpful strategy in order to round. We're going to take a look at a few examples of rounding roller coasters today. When using a rounding roller coaster, it is important to understand that it is simply a number line which has been broken and adjusted into a visual representation of rounding. In order to use a rounding roller coaster, we're going to follow our rounding steps. We are being asked today to round 63 to the nearest 10. Step 1 is to identify the place value to which we are rounding, which is the tens place. Our lower place value will tell that 10 where it will round to. Our second step is to identify the benchmark numbers. Our first benchmark number is said in the name of the number, 63. 60 is a number that we would say when counting by tens. After 60 comes 70 when counting by tens. So our benchmark numbers are 60 and 70. Now we can fill in our rounding roller coaster. 60, 61, 62, 63, that's our number. 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70. 63 is where our roller coaster stopped today. When we look at our midpoint of 65, we see that 63 is before our midpoint, so this will round down to the lower benchmark number of 60. 63 rounds down to 60. Let's take a look at an example with a 3-digit number. This time we will round 587 again to the tens place. Step 1 is to identify the place to which we are rounding, which is the tens. Our lower place value will determine the number to which 587 will round. Our second step is to identify the benchmark numbers. I say the benchmark number when I say the name of this number. 587. 580 is a number that I would say when counting by tens. We know that if we were to progress on a number line, the next 10 that we would say would be 590. Now we will fill in our rounding roller coaster using counting by ones. 580, 581, 582, 583, 584, 585, 586, 587, 588, 589, and 590. Our number that we were given was 587. When we identify the midpoint, we see that this number comes after the midpoint. So our number will round up or forward to the larger benchmark number of 590. Now we will take a look at how to identify rounding to the hundreds place. Let's use the number 412. Now we're going to round to the hundreds place, which means our tens place will be telling the hundreds to which benchmark number it will round. When we round to the hundreds, our benchmark numbers also switch to hundreds, but we still say the name, 412. So our first benchmark number is 400. After 400 comes 500. 412, we're starting at 400 and counting by tens because that's our lower place value. 410, 420, 430, 440, 450, 460, 470, 480, 490, and then 500. 412 has a 1 in the tens place. So on my rounding roller coaster, I will identify where the 1 in the tens place is. If I look at my midpoint, this is before the midpoint. So we are rounding down or backwards to the lower benchmark number of 400. Now we will take a look at another 3-digit number rounding to the hundreds. This number is 895. Step 1 is to identify the place value to which we are rounding. We are rounding to the hundreds, so our lower place value of the tens will tell that number where it will round. Because I am rounding to the hundreds, my benchmark numbers will also be hundreds. I say the first benchmark number when I say the name of this given number, 895. So our first 100 benchmark is 800. I know when counting by hundreds, after 800 comes 900. So my two benchmark numbers are 800 and 900. Because our lower place value, the tens, is telling the hundreds where to go, we will be counting by tens. 800, 810, 820, 830, 840, 850, 860, 870, 880, 890, and 900. I am going to look for my 100 and tens place to be on my benchmark numbers, between my benchmark numbers. 890. This is where 895 would be. So I look at my midpoint. 895 comes after my midpoint, which means I would round up or forward to the greater benchmark number of 900. This is how you use the rounding roller coaster to round 2- and 3-digit numbers to the nearest 10 and 100.
Okay, so we've taken a look at a couple examples. We're going to record these steps down for us in our math notebook. So grab your math notebook and something to write with. If you don't have your notebook nearby, grab a piece of paper to write on. And if you are still struggling to find that, remember I will upload this to Seesaw and you will just need to record it later, okay? So I'm going to switch my camera here so that you can see our math notebook. Beautiful. And we have a title of rounding, okay? Rounding. We're going to write the definition of rounding, and we're going to write the 3 steps of how to round, okay? So rounding is what I'd like for you to title your notes. I'll give you a moment to write that title down and or to find your notebook if you're scrambling. So we have rounding as our title. Make sure you've written down that title. We're going to write down the definition of rounding first. So rounding, according to our definition in 3rd grade, is when you are estimating, when you are estimating a number to get it closer to a number to work with. So let's write that down. Estimating, and I know my hand is in the way, it will be out of the way shortly. Estimating a number by changing one or more digits, and there's a vocab word that we've learned before too, 1 or more digits to 0 for easier calculations. And that's long, so I will give you some time to write that down. My hand is almost out of your way. So it is estimating a number by changing 1 or more digits to 0 for easier calculations. It's a lot easier to use numbers in our head when we have zeros in them because it's less place values for us to keep track of. So rounding is estimating a number by changing 1 or more digits to 0 for easier calculations. And again, we use rounding in everyday life. We shared some examples with you on that video of when we might use rounding, such as if you're planning a party and you need to know how much pizza you need, or you need to know how many chairs you'll need to set up for your party, or how many supplies, such as paper plates and napkins. We use rounding. And stores use rounding as well. It is very rare that you will find a package of something with like 272. Normally, they'll just round that to an even number of 270 or 300 items in a package. So rounding is used every day all around us. And again, it's estimating a number by changing 1 or more digits to 0 for easier calculations. In a moment, we're going to write down 3 steps for rounding. No matter what number you are rounding, even later on in life when you're rounding to the millions, you can always follow these 3 steps. It's the same procedure no matter how large the number, no matter which place value you are rounding to. You will always follow these 3 steps, so they're very helpful for us, okay? So you are estimating a number by changing 1 or more digits to 0 for easier calculation. And I see a few of you still writing, so I'm going to again give you enough time to complete that, and then we will write down those 3 steps. Okay, I'll leave this here so you can still see. And again, it will also be on Seesaw as soon as we are done. Oh, my camera's rocking. Give me a minute. Let me get on some flat ground. There we go. I'll also upload this to Seesaw. Okay. Step 1 when we are rounding. Step 1 is exactly the same no matter what number we're rounding to, whether we're rounding to the ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, millions, whatever it is, you will always determine, and determine is a word that means decide. So you will always determine, and I'll zoom in to make it a little bit closer, determine the place value to which you are rounding. And that will usually be shown in the directions. In real life, there aren't directions saying choose this place value, so we would use common sense. For example, if I were going to have a party with 36 people, it would make sense for me to round to the tens because 36 is a 2-digit number and has tens. If I rounded to the hundreds, I would either have 0 items or 100 items. So that's not enough or way too much. If I rounded to the tens, I would end up with 30 or 40 items. So that's a closer estimate of the number that I would need. Okay, so you determine the place value. And I underlined place value because that's a very important keyword, and I'd like for you to do the same. So determine the place value to which you are rounding. On our math work, most times, it will show you the place value because we're just learning how to round, so we need that extra support. So usually you'll look in the directions. In real life, you'll use a lot of common sense once you're comfortable with this skill. Determine the place value to which you are rounding. So the place value. Step 2 is identify the closest benchmark numbers. So identify is a word that we use that means find. So find them. Identify the closest benchmark numbers. And when we say closest, we mean imagining that you are on a number line. So when you're on a number line, which we've been using since kindergarten to learn how to count, we know where numbers should go in order. So we know that if a number is close to 30 on a number line, the benchmark 1000 would not make any sense because that is not close at all. So you're identifying the closest benchmark numbers. And again, I underlined benchmark numbers because that's a key vocabulary word, and I'm going to show you how to think about this shortly in your brain. We only have one more thing to write after this one, just one. Nice job, Miss Kennedy. Looks professional. So step 1 is to determine the place value to which you are rounding. Step 2 is to identify the closest benchmark numbers. We only have one more step to complete, and that is step 3. Step 3 is where we will decide whether the number would round up or down. And some people like to use the words backwards or forwards when you're thinking about a number line, but rounding up or down in value also works. So whichever words are most comfortable for you are fine. I'm going to stick with that up or down. So you will decide whether the number would round up or down. and I'm going to underline up or down because that's the final step that I'm taking. This is all of the notes for the day. I will leave these up here for you to continue copying them down. And right now I'm also going to take a picture of them and put them on Seesaw so that you will have those available immediately. There we go. All right, as you continue writing, I'm going to upload these to Seesaw, so they will be there for you very shortly. Awesome. Go. And we're going to put that under the math folder. There you go. It is processing and uploading. Okay, so if you need these later, if you lose your notebook, you couldn't find your notebook, you didn't have enough time, it is on Seesaw under the math resources folder, and it has just confirmed that it is uploaded. See, there it is. Dun, 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 dun. Beautiful. Okay, so I'll give you another couple seconds to finish writing this down, and then we're going to talk about how you're going to practice this skill today. So one reason that I had you underline these 3 phrases is because, yes, those are important vocabulary for us. Also, because this is a lot to remember. So when I'm rounding, it's much easier for me to remember these 3 short phrases than to remember these 3 segmented sentences. So when I'm rounding, I think place value, benchmark number, up or down, boom, and I've got it. And you'll practice this enough that that will come naturally to you. Place value, benchmark number, up or down. That's how we round. We're going to identify the place value to which we're rounding. We're going to figure out the benchmark numbers on either side, and we're going to decide, does that move up or down, forward or backward, okay? Again, this is on Seesaw. There's proof, so you don't freak out. It's right there, okay? I'm going to switch back to my camera for the sake of time so that we can make sure we have an understanding of what we are doing for the remainder of our time together, okay? All right. So, rounding. You have seen a rounding roller coaster. The fantastic thing about Seesaw is that you have this to watch anytime that you'd like, and you don't even have to listen to all of me, so you can just click through to the part that you need. So if you get stuck and you forget how to do a rounding roller coaster, go watch the video and follow through with me step by step. Just use the number that you've been given, okay? On Seesaw, you have been given an assignment, and some of you have already turned this in, but I've looked at it and it has not been done correctly. So now that you've seen the lesson and we've talked through this, if you've turned it in, I want you to go back and check your work, okay? So I'm going to add a response here. Oh, I don't remember what my directions are. I guess I should click View Instructions. There we go. And look, Miss Sousa is so nice, she even reads them to me. Aw, she's so nice.
Watch the instructional video.
Done. Step 2.
Review the success criteria on slide 1.
Ah, haven't done that yet. Okay, let's see. I can explain what rounding and benchmark numbers are. Yep, rounding is moving closer to a benchmark number. Benchmark numbers have zeros in them and make it easier to use. Okay, so I've got that down. So let's watch the rest of the directions.
Review the success criteria on slide 1.
Done.
Use the pencil to complete the rounding roller coaster for each slide.
Oh, I haven't done that yet. Oh, I see my slides over here. Okay, slide 2. Look, there's those words that Miss Sousa had us underline. Your place value, your benchmark, decide up or down. See, I told you they'd be helpful. And look right here, Miss Sousa didn't lie. The directions tell me to the nearest 10. Wow! Round 63 to the nearest 10. Step 1, record your number in the box. Well, there's my number. There's the box. Done. Step 2, fill in the rest of the roller coaster. Ha! I'm not doing this for you. You guys thought you had me doing your work. This is what you're going to do, is fill in the rest of the roller coaster. Step 3, this is what most of you missed. Circle the correctly rounded benchmark number. If you just fill in this, but you don't circle either this benchmark number or this benchmark number, you didn't give me an answer because you didn't tell me which nearest 10 it went to. So people who already turned in your work, you did a beautiful job of filling out the roller coaster. You did not circle which benchmark number it rounded to. That's how I get your answer, is looking at if you circled the lower benchmark number or the higher benchmark number, okay? So let's pretend I have done the reviewing success criteria. I filled out my 4 roller coasters. I forgot what to do, so I'm going to go listen to Miss Susan tell me what to do.
Check your work with the directions to be sure you rounded to the correct place value. Click the check to turn in your work.
I've got to check my work. So I'm going to make sure when I look at this work right here that I rounded to the nearest 100, not the tens. I'm going to make sure when I look here that I rounded to the nearest 100, not to the nearest tens. On this one, I am rounding to the nearest 10, not the nearest 100. And right here again, nearest 10. So now I'm going to pretend I have checked my work. It is all wonderful. And then I hit submit because I checked it and I'm sure that it's right. Now y'all will not turn in work like this because that's blank, okay? You will actually complete the steps. I just didn't complete the steps because that would be showing you the answers and I'm not going to get tricked like that, okay? So this is your assignment to complete. It has been released under activities. It is called Rounding Day 1. This video that we watched together is right here if you should need it again, okay? So you're first getting ready to go to lunch because we only have 4 minutes. So this is going to take place in your afternoon work time, okay? I want to go over our schedule for the rest of the day. Do not log off. You're getting ready to go to lunch. At 12 o'clock, I am in office hours. So if you are stuck or you or your adult need to speak with me, log on to Zoom. I'll be sitting right here ready to talk with you. At 1:35, you have related arts. You have a new related arts this week. You are with Miss Kadowitz, okay? At 2:20, you'll be back with me. I'm going to show you now where to find Mrs. Kadowitz's Zoom, okay? So just like you did for Mr. Nelson, on Seesaw, you will go to Miss Kadowitz's class. If you've been a student at Indian Creek, you know Miss Kadowitz has red hair, but if you haven't been, her class is called Computer Science, so CS3. You're gonna go to Computer Science. Look right here, she's so nice. She has a Bitmoji classroom just like me, and she says, click on Zoom to join my Zoom. That's easy. So I'm gonna view the original, and I'm gonna click on Zoom. And that's gonna, no, it's not gonna send me there because I'm the teacher, but it's going to send me to this Zoom. So this page is sending you to this. If you wanna go there, click on it. And then it will let me join. I'm not going to join because that would kick us off of this one, okay? But it's that simple. So again, you go to her Bitmoji classroom right on the front page, click on the Zoom icon and click on the link and it will take you there. Okay? So again, you're going to lunch right now. You're not doing math. At 12 o'clock, you're going to do office hours with help and you're going to start working on your math. At 1:35, you're going to Miss Kadowitz's Zoom, and at 2:20, you are coming back here to have end of day announcements. Okay? All right. If you do not have any questions, goodbye. I love you. I will see your face at 2:20 or 12 if you need my help. If you do have questions, I have 2 minutes to answer them. See ya.